because sooner or later you will hit that, and we are going to face these data types in during several courses. So during the JavaScript class and during the SQL class. Okay. So let's talk about the sooner. Let's make it sooner. So what the data type is basically the classification of data. This concept actually was invented at a time when storage was very expensive, data storage was expensive, and the programmer time was very cheap. Okay, this maybe we are talking about 60s. Okay, 60s and 70s. So if you are interested, you can actually visit the Computer Science Museum, which is the intersection of 101 and Shoreline. I urge you to do that because it's very interesting. They have very strange working hours, say between noon and 4 p.m. Okay, but this is because of the budget restrictions. And if you visit that museum, you will notice that you'll see one of the artifacts, which is disk storage, one of the very first disk storages. And that machine has the size of a big washing machine. And on top of that, sitting a disk, metallic disk, probably maybe say half an inch thick and this size, okay, 1 yard in diameter. And that disk was capable of storing 4 megabytes of information. Okay, we can laughing at that. But that machine cost a fortune. Okay, only government organization were capable of buying it. Okay, it was very expensive. And as soon as the storage is expensive, people trying to find a way how to organize the information storage on that disk so they can utilize this expensive equipment efficiently. Okay, so and then they realized that different information, different type of information which you are going to store on this disk has different requirements to the space, because what happens is that when you write to this disk, first you have to inform computer that computer should reserve specific place, a specific space on that disk where you are going to put your information. You cannot simply drag and drop as you used to now, right? It was not done that before. So you have to actually inform, reserve that space before you're writing some information, before you're going to write some information onto the disk. So, and then you realize that depending on what information you put on a disk, you have different requirements for a space. If you are going to put content of the book, which is, we can call it textual information, text, then you have to reserve a lot of space. If you are going to store some date and time, like calendar date, you may need probably space for 20 characters max, right? Probably less. If you are going to store some whole number, you may need probably maybe say 30, 40 character max. Okay, so requirements are different. And then they classify this information based on the space requirements, and they come with the following classification. Sorry, these data types are taken from Oracle database, but they're pretty similar with other programming languages. Most of the programming languages, they have similar concept of data types. Okay, so what it has to do with XML, as soon as we're storing information and data into the XML, XML should support these data types as well. So we can have support for that, and we have it. So we can specify ranges, available ranges. We can specify allowed values, and so on, so on, so on. So another plus for XML syntax is that you don't need to learn a new language, and you can use the same editor which you use to create your XML document when you're going to create XML schemas. And then XML schema also support data types. So another way, another example when this verification or validation is very useful is to validating data. Suppose you put this information, this date, in your file or an XML file, it might be another file, and then there is absolutely no doubt that we are talking about the 11th of March here, right? As soon as you send this information to Europe, then it turns out to be a completely different date. We are going to talk about the 3rd of November, okay? Because obviously for the people living there, this is the 3rd of November, but not for us, okay? So the data is actually specified correctly. The format is correct, but it has different meaning. So we have to eliminate the ambiguity, okay? With other words, we can specify the data type as saying as a date, but this date format should follow this format. Okay, so first 4 numbers for years, and then month and date. After that, we can put this date in this format, or actually we can use this one if you specify the format correctly. And if we send it to Europe, then absolutely no problem with that, because application in Europe will read this, will read the format, and then we'll change the format if necessary, but the meaning of this format will present. Actually, the data will be present. We are going to talk about 11th of March. Okay, March 11 here. Okay, and if you send to Europe, there will be absolutely no controversy. They are not going to think about November. They will also think about 11th of March. Okay, there will be ambiguity will be eliminated. This is also possible with XML files. You cannot do this with a Notepad or actually textual file. Okay. So here's an example of an XML schema. You see that this format is exactly XML format. Okay, this may look like a normal XML document, except we're using this XS and column, which are reserved characters. Okay, we are not allowed to use these characters and actually columns in our XML document because they were reserved. Remember that? So, but otherwise, other than that, it describes our relatives XML document. It says that root element should be relatives, and this is a complex type. What complex type means is that it contains children. Okay, that's what it is, hierarchy. And then we have sequence of the elements, and sequence goes in this order. It should be relationship, first name, last name, age, occupation, country. Okay, and besides listing these elements, so if your XML document contains these elements in a different order, that will be an error. Okay, but besides that, we specify also data type. We say a relationship comes as a string, basically array of characters. We have our first name also as a array of characters. This is last name is also characters. Age comes as an integer. Integer means whole number. So you can specify the age as only whole number. If you specify age as a 15.7, for example, that will be an error. Okay, or any other format, or say 15 with the words, that will be an error. It should be absolutely whole number, integer. Occupation and country, they also will be string. Okay, specify. So if you specify first name with as a number, then it will be an error. That error will be immediately caught. Okay, and so that's the end of the nesting sequence, and then there's the end of the complex type, which is essentially the relative element, and that's what it is. So that's an XML schema example which describes our document. So if we save it on a server, then every time we read our relatives documents, every time you actually submit your input information to the server, we can validate that, and then we can catch error easily, much faster than other methods. Any questions? Okay, all clear. So what we can do, we can refer to XML schema. We can specify that XML schema location. It can be specified as on a server. This is the relatives.xsd XML schema definition. And then this document can be used to validate our XML document. In this case, this is our XML document. Basically, we make a relation to the XML schema. And then if we have this, and you see that this XML document conforms to the relative.xsd. If they are parsed together, then no errors should be detected here, because we created this document as do we? That's a question. We have, let's see, it has relatives as a root element, and we don't have relatives here. Okay, do we specify person? No, we didn't specify person. So that will be an error. Okay, so this XML document in this following format will violate the standards, because we didn't specify person, who should be specified here, and we don't have opening. Sorry, and where is that? And we don't have relatives, opening relatives here. Okay, so that will be violation of the XML, violation of our standards. Okay, so these kind of errors will be easy caught at the beginning, and then makes life much easier. Okay, and can be done automatically without human intervention. So next thing is that we can specify values in XML document. So we already seen an example of that. These are actually not complete list of different data types. We can specify that the first name, for example, this should be capitalized. is a string, and then age is integer, and the date of birth, for example, DOB, specified as date. Okay, like in the specified format, like years, year, month, and date. We can specify default values US. For example, in the case when a person is not specified, or actually operator does not specify the country, then the default one will be used instead. We can do that. We can specify fixed value, for example, in the USA, and then in this case, this value cannot be changed in XML document. We are not allowed to change it. If we change that, then that will be violation of the rules. We can also specify it as different conditions here. For example, we are talking about age, and we specify the simple type. It's not complex, and then it's an integer, it's a whole number. We can say its minimum inclusive value is 0. It means that we can specify minimum value as 0, and also we can specify maximum value as 120 inclusive. Okay, so it means that the age can be specified only within this range, between 0 and 120. If in our XML document we specify age as 125, it will be violation of it. So this error will be immediately caught. Basically, what we do, we actually verify not only the structure of XML document, but also the values which you put in XML document. No other textual format files will allow this validation. Okay, that's the beauty of it. We can actually catch errors on the early stages. Okay, and that's ranges of the XML. So in this case, we talking about occupation. And then we can also say that it's a simple type, not complex. It does not, occupation does not contain nested elements. Its data type is a string, basically is characters there. Value should consist of characters. And these are actually enumerated values. It means that only one of these 5 values are allowed to be used. Okay, so we can use only one of these 5 values here, and if we specify a different value, then that will be not valid XML document. We can catch this error earlier. Okay? So said that, we can also specify the length of the first name, for example. In this case, we can say we are based on the length of the string, so length value is 12. It means that first name cannot exceed 12 characters, 12 characters, cannot be longer than 12 characters, and then we can do that. Okay? Also, we can specify the case, all possible details of the XML data. We can specify an XML schema, okay, which allows data validation to done efficiently. Okay, we can specify all details, and we can validate this data. So styles. Any questions about the validity, XML validation? No, clear? Value is actually attribute, right? Length value.
With quotes. Quotes are they done on purpose that way?
No, this is actually, I mean, distortion of the double quotes. That's what I mean. This is PowerPoint problem. Okay.
Yeah, because the 12 is
PowerPoint distorted this. I know this is a problem, and here too. Mm-hmm. Okay, I don't know how to fix that. But when you copy and paste the documents, I mean, when you use this, you have to erase this one because these are distorted. Yeah. These are not, okay? So this is not done on purpose. So next thing is that, actually I expected that question. If I have XML schema located on my server, right? Let's assume we have XML schema document located on each of your machines, okay? Now, if I open XML document, if I create an XML document and then I specify some invalid values, like for example, invalid value for age as 150, whatever. Would the browser issue a warning on error? How validation happens? We had a case when, remember I had an example here where we're referring to the XML document located on a server. This XML schema document is called relatives.xsd and is located on this server. So basically computer knows, if you have internet connection, computer knows where this XML schema definition document is located, right? So let's assume I created the correct XML document, but for the age I specify incorrect value. I specify 59.5, for example. So would browser report an error or not? Should? Other opinion? Wild guess, right? So answer is no. Okay, browser will not automatically detect that, and your application will not automatically detect that. Okay, so you have to sit and modify, write a code, validate XML validator, so this XML schema is taken into consideration. If you don't do that, then XML document is not going to be automatically validated. Okay, it's not done by default, with other words. Okay, you have to sit and code. Okay, that's the answer. So next thing which we are going to do, we are going to look at the styles. Remember, we used cascading style sheets in for HTML. We can use the same cascading style sheets for formatting XML document, and that's what we are going to do today. So what you need to do is just you need to create this document, XML document. You can copy and paste and save it as a test5.xml. Just remember the folder where you're going to save. If you decide to copy and paste, it should work, because I don't see any double quote validations. So create this document, make sure that you can open it in a browser, so it's actually well-formed XML document. Well, if you decide to copy and paste, please pay attention that this angle bracket is not the first character, so I have to delete this space, couple of spaces here, just to make it work. I save it as a save as test5 XML as all files. I should be able to test open test file, and that's how it looks in the browser. Okay, correctly but not nice. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to modify this so it will look much better. So in order to do that, let's go to the next slide. This is the document. You can actually copy and paste and create this XML file. The next document which we should create is style sheet. Is gone. Yeah, okay, no, so sorry. The next document which you are going to create is called myxsl.xsl, which should have the following. Oh, come on. This one. It has this code. You can also copy and paste. Let's do that together, 68. Okay, 68. I'm going to copy this part and create another document. Oh, sorry. Okay. Okay, and I'm going to save this document as myxsl.xsl in the same folder. XSL. MyXSL. Okay, so after done that, just make sure that this is the very first character. I should be able to double click this document. myxsl.xsl, and it should be able to show. It will show like this. Okay, no data is basically style. So after that, I should link these two documents together. This works as a style sheet for the for my XML document. See. Now, what we need to do is just we need to edit this test5 XML document, first document, adding this line as a second line in the file. Let's do it together. going 69. And copying this proportion only and pasting into the first document, this test5.xml. I'm going to paste it here. Okay? These two documents should be located in the same folder. So after done that, so save this, and I double click on the test5. And you see that my document, which contains menu, is nicely formatted. Okay, it actually, we can change this format changing only one line. But bottom line is, it looks much better, much better. So what's the good of it? Where we can use this? Okay, this format. So I had faced one example, one practical good example which I can share with you, is that I was working in a company which producing very complicated equipment. It's actually very complex equipment, and you could not test this equipment in a lab environment, because essentially in order to test completely you have to have different variations of different parameters which are not feasible to do within a given amount of time we had. So what happens is that we ship this instrument, we test it as much as we could, we ship this instrument, but then we realize that the customer may face situations when this problem will show up. Okay? So what to do in this case? Definitely you can throw an error or exception and customer will be frightened, and then the next thing we're going to do is just to call you, right, the customer support. Every call costs at least $5, at least. If it's complicated call, which requires a lot of people to be involved, then the cost will rise drastically. So you realize that if more errors we have, more money company is going to lose. So we decided to follow the Microsoft pattern. Like, remember, when some error happens or exception happens on your machines, from time to time you see the dialog box, pop-up box saying, you know what, some exceptions happen. Do you like to provide the feedback to Microsoft, right? And then you say, okay, and then this information is gathered about that exception and automatically sent to the Microsoft. Some people may argue saying, you know what, Microsoft is cutting costs on the QA engineers and actually directing this cost to the users, okay? And this is not fair. But on the other hand, it's not, I mean, this is completely untrue. The reason is that Microsoft cannot test the application completely because it will require an enormous amount of time, okay? So on the other hand, if you report about a problem, and actually not you, but your machine, because it's done automatically, right, with your consent, then it will first of all report this problem to Microsoft, and Microsoft can go ahead and improve them, fix this error, and improve their products. So actually, it's a win-win situation. Especially, it does not take much time from your much of your time. So the company which I was working in actually went into that direction. They decided not to show the exception or error to the end user, but save information about this exception in an XML file. This XML file may grow drastically over the extended period of time, maybe say 500 or 600 or 700 megabytes, and then this information is not going to be sent to the company. But what happened is that when field engineer visiting these customers from time to time, they silently copy this XML file onto this flash drive, bring this flash drive back to the original company who developed the application, and then developers started to analyze. Okay, so imagine that you have 700 megabyte XML file, and then you have to analyze all errors. But it's not only errors logged there; it's all information messages, warnings, and errors, and so on. That will be extremely difficult to do. It will be easier to do if you actually can color this XML file. So you can color exceptions or errors red, you can color warning as yellow, and informational messages as a green. What you need to do in this case, you need to scroll down the document and then look for the red color, which is much easier to do, right? Pretty much like we did here. We can introduce this style sheet, and then we can actually instruct the style sheet to color the exceptions or errors in red. And that actually facilitated reading and analyzing this XML documents drastically. Plus also, if you go to another example, like creating your home library, you know, listing of your books you have, you can actually introduce this style, which will be much easier and eye-pleasing to work with. Okay? So that's a good example of styling in XML. So let's go back to the presentation. So, and this is actually how the menu may look like. So next topic is XML editors, what you can use for creating XML documents. You can use Notepad, but you have to be very careful, right? Because every single mistake makes your XML document as not well formed. You can use editors which are available. This XML Spy, which is a shareware. You can use Edit Plus. You can use this XML Notepad application from Microsoft. This is freeware. You don't. It's free. But it's actually my personal experience saying that XML Notepad is good when you're editing existing XML document and you're editing values. This is actually very good. But creating new XML document and editing elements and so on is not so convenient. Okay, there might be other applications, other editors available. These are a few of them, maybe more. Okay, you can go and visit Wikipedia and get more information from there. So this is the end. New element which created. So what topics which are not covered on this presentation, but I created another one which is gone now, is questions which you can be asked on interview. Okay. So first question is that what about the valid and well-formed XML documents? You should be able to answer this question, right? Or they might be actually present you some examples which are invalid XML documents, like missing root elements, or element cases are not preserved, like opening and closing elements are not preserved, or contain reserved characters, right? Something like that. This kind of examples. Okay, not much. They may not ask many questions on XML, but the very few questions they ask you should be able to answer. So this is first two concepts of XML, and then some XML examples. Okay, XML again is very important. You definitely will face it, okay, either during the modification of the settings or validation of data. That's another interview questions, where you use XML. Okay, so answer to it is just I modify application settings like we did for XML Learner, right? And then modify, because application when it's created is supposed to be used in a production. So if you are going to test the application, you have to change some settings within this application. So for example, database which is used is pointing to the test database, and server which is going to be used is pointing to the test server, because you cannot test against the production and so on. So these configuration settings definitely you could be able, you change that. Second is the data validation. So for